Hey guys, and welcome to this poster design tutorial. If you want to create a really clean and simple geometric Swiss style poster design in Adobe Illustrator, then this is the video for you. So here I am in Illustrator, and these are some geometric Swiss style posters I created earlier using the techniques I'm about to demonstrate. Now, for those of you who may be new to Swiss design is also known as the International Typographic Style and originated in Switzerland in the 1950s from the Bauhaus movement. The Swiss design approach was all about practicality, clarity, conformity, and stripping things back. The idea of Swiss design is to optimize visual communication and remove distracting information to make the communication as impactful as possible. For this reason, Swiss design is well known for its clean, high contrast, heavily structured, minimal and highly typographic approach. As Swiss design was developed in the 1950s, the print methods would have also been simple to produce them, which is reflected in its style. Swiss design typically includes very clear and legible typography, only few flat, high contrasting colors, simple geometric shapes, and when imagery is used, it will be very simple, often monochrome, to retain its simplicity and clarity so as not to compete too much with the surrounding type elements. In this video, we will be looking at a specific Swiss design approach where we will be using geometric blocks and shapes as part of the poster design. Now, this video may seem long, but I promise you this is not your average tutorial. This video is going to be jam-packed with lots of tips and tricks that will help you design quality poster designs. For this poster design, we will be looking at how to set up a document, how to use a grid, how to include artwork, how to work with type, and how to work with color and create variations. So be sure to check the bookmarks in the video so you can jump back or ahead at any time. So a lot of value in this video for you. After this video, you will be able to create geometric Swiss style poster designs like this in Adobe Illustrator super easily. So let's get into it. So when creating a poster design, it can really help to undertake some research first. This can give you some inspiration if you're not sure what you want to create, and can also be good if you already have an idea in mind for a particular theme or style to research further. To do this, it can help to start with a mood board. To create my mood board, I like to save found images or take pictures when I'm out and about. For the past year, I have been doing this in Figma, where I can paste all my found research and see it on one huge board. I find this to be a really powerful platform to build mood boards, but that's a topic for another video. Another good source of inspiration is Pinterest. So here I am on Pinterest, and here I have a board I have created that contains a lot of geometric Swiss poster designs. So as we can see, there are lots of examples of geometric style Swiss posters. What we can see here is very clear and legible typography with only a few high contrasting colors and simple geometric shapes. If you want to take a look at this board, you can find the link in the description where you can take a closer look at some of these references. So when working with poster design, it can really help to look at some inspiration to get you started. Now, another important thing to keep in mind when designing a poster is to consider the content first. Before designing a poster, it helps to have a good understanding of what needs to be included in the poster design, as this can really help to plan and develop your design and layout. It helps to consider things like how much type to include, any photos, textures or illustrations, any logos, or any tables or charts. For my poster design, all I need to think about is type and image. For the image, I'll be using this geometric texture I created earlier, and for the text content, I'll be including the following text, which I have prepared in a Google document. Here we have a title, a subtitle, 2 paragraphs of type, and some footer elements. If you want to get a look at this Google Doc and grab your text to follow along with this tutorial, you can find the link in the description. So once I'm aware of the elements I need to include in my poster, I can then start thinking about the design. So a technique I like to use before I create my poster design on computer is to sketch my ideas. When it comes to design, I often like to start on paper first. I find sketching can help generate my ideas quickly, and having an idea first makes the experience of artworking on the computer much easier, so I'm not just pushing pixels around and hoping for something to look good. So before I developed my poster, I first looked over my mood board and then I first thought about what kind of layout I wanted to develop. To create this poster design, I first sketched out my ideas quite roughly. Here you can see a range of ideas I had for a variety of layouts. This will typically start out really rough, where I'll sketch into blank frames on a piece of paper to see and test some initial compositions. For my poster, I decided to have a closer look at this one, where the geometric texture will be placed on the top half of the page and the type will be placed below. Now, Swiss poster design is all about structure, so I also wanted to see how I could best structure the elements in my design. So to do this, I would print out some grids from my poster design sketchbook and explore which grid would work well for my design. After looking over my grids and drawing out my sketch design, again, but this time on grids, I realized that the best grid for this poster design would be an 8-column grid with a margin. Here you can see that in my sketch, I'm thinking about my visual hierarchy and how I want to lay out my elements. Here you can see that the geometric texture will sit well in the top half of the page, and the type will fit below, aligned to the columns like so. So a really simple layout here, but nonetheless, making sure to consider a simple and clear hierarchy. If you want to sketch out your designs as I have just demonstrated, you can get access to the Poster Design Sketchbook, link is in the description. So once I had an idea and my initial structure sorted, I then jumped onto the computer to lay out my design. So a lot of preparation work and thinking and process before I actually get onto the computer. So in Illustrator, to begin, I'm going to set up a new document. I'll come up to File, New. Now on this occasion, I'm going to use a standard print size document. So on the top tab, I'll click Print, I'll click View All Presets, I'll select A3. Over on the right, I'll make sure my orientation is set to Portrait, I'll set my color to RGB and make sure my raster is set to 300 and click Create. And up will pop a new document. Now you may be wondering why I set this to RGB. Well, I like to start with RGB because if I decide to use this artwork for a digital composition later, perhaps for a social media post, it's not easy to change and convert colors to CMYK from RGB, but it's easy to change from RGB to CMYK. So to avoid extra work in future, I like to start with RGB. So before we start adding any visual elements, I want to set up a grid. Now looking back at my sketch, I decided an 8-column grid would work really well for my design to align my text elements. Now setting up a grid in Illustrator is a little different from setting up a grid in programs like Photoshop or InDesign. There are various ways to do this, but here is a really good tip on how to set up column grids in Illustrator. So to begin, I want to establish my margin space. To do this, I'll come up to Preferences on Mac or Edit on Windows, come down and click Units. With the menu open, I'll be sure to set General to millimeters and click OK. I'll come over to the Shape tool, grab the Rectangle tool and draw a box to the full size of the canvas area. Next, I'll come up to Object, Path and click Offset Path. When the menu appears, I'll type in -20 and click OK. And this will reduce the size of the box by 20 mils. So I now know that there is a 20 mil margin around my canvas area. Okay, so now to set the grid. So with the shape selected, I'll come up to Object, down to Path, come across and select Split into Grid. Upon click, a menu will appear. First, I'll click on Preview, and up in the rows, I'll leave this to 1. On columns, I'll set this to 8. In this instance, I'll leave the gutter set to 0. Notice now how the grid is set into the shape. Once happy, I'll click OK, and this is where the magic happens. So with the blocks still selected, I'll come up to View, scroll down to Guides, come across and select Make Guides. Upon click, we will now transform the block into guides, which we can now use for our poster design. To finish, I'll come over to the Layers panel, double click on the top layer and name this Grid. And now I'll have a nice column grid I can begin to develop my poster with. And if I press either Command: on Mac or Control: on Windows, we can toggle on and off the guides. Perfect. Now, one last thing to include, I'll come back up to File and hit Document Setup. Here I'll set the bleed to 3mm and click OK. Now, you don't have to include bleed, but if you plan to print your poster, it is wise to add some bleed as your printer may require it. So with my margin, guides and baseline setup, I can now begin to compose my visual elements on the page. Now, sometimes when designing a poster, it can be easy to start with an image and then position the type around it. Looking back at my sketch, we can see that for this idea, I want to place my geometric artwork in the top half of the poster and the type in the bottom half. For this poster design, it's going to be pretty straightforward. For this design, I'm going to use a geometric texture I prepared earlier. In a previous video, I demonstrated how to create geometric textures from scratch and showcased a free design resource you can use to create vector shapes. If you want to follow along with this poster design and get the geometric texture kit and watch how to make them from scratch in a free tutorial, link is in the description. So I'm going to come to a separate document where I prepared my geometric textures previously. For this example, I'm going to use this simple circle texture. I'll select the artwork, come into my new document, and before I paste, I want to sort out some housekeeping. So I'll come over to the Layers panel, I'll press Command L to create a new layer, and I'll name this Layer Content. I'll click the lock icon on the grid layer for now, so I don't accidentally select the guide. And on the new content layer, I'll paste and position in my poster, like so. Now looking back at my sketch, I only want this to fill half of the page. So next, I'll just remove some of the artwork until only the top half of the page contains the artwork. And if I need to, I'll resize the background to fit the bleed around the outside of the poster. Now again, looking back at my sketch, I also wanted 3 strokes to sit at the bottom of my poster to align nicely with some of the footer elements. To do this is simple. I'll grab the pen tool, click on the far left margin, hold shift and click on the second column to create a perfect horizontal line across 2 columns. I'll press V to activate the selection tool, and with the stroke selected, I'll come into my stroke panel, set the stroke to 2, and I'll set the color to black for now. With it still selected, I'll drag to the right while holding Alt to quickly duplicate and place next to it and leave a gap. I'll do this one last time until I have 3 strokes at the bottom, like so. So now I have my image texture roughly in the poster design, I can start to use type. So looking back at my sketch, we can see my plan for this. I want my title at the top, a subtitle, 2 paragraphs and some footer elements. If I jump into my Google Doc, I can see the type I need to include. So I'll begin by selecting the title, I'll copy that and back into Illustrator, I'll select the type tool and click once in my poster. Upon clicking once, this will create a type element. Next I'll paste and my new title will appear. Right now I have a default font applied, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that too much at this point. So looking at my sketch, I want to place this just under the texture. So back in the poster, I'll just carefully place this up and under my texture and placed it against the far left column grid. Now depending on your default properties, here I'll just push the type up a little bit to fit in the poster. I can also click and drag on the corner pin while holding shift to scale the type up or down like so. So once I have one type element, it's easy to create others. Next, I'll click the title, and while holding Alt, drag it down and place this under the title. I'll jump back into the Google Docs, copy my subtitle, back into Illustrator. I'll double click on the new type layer to select it. I'll press Command A on Mac or Control A on PC to select all and paste in the new text. I'll press Escape to deselect the type on this occasion. I'll reduce the size down to fit under the title nicely. So next, I want to create a paragraph of text. So back into my Google Doc, I'll select my copy for my first paragraph, and back in Illustrator, I'm going to do something different. This time, with the type tool selected, instead of clicking just once, I'll click and drag to make a frame. Upon release, some text will be placed inside, which I'll select and paste in my new type. Now, if the type is too large, I'll come up and change the type to around 20 points. Now, looking at my sketch, I want this type to only fit the first 2 columns. So I'll make sure to drag the bounding box and the frame to set in place like so. Now you may notice you have hyphenation set here. To turn this off, I'll come to the paragraph panel and make sure to uncheck the box in the bottom left. Easy. Next, for my last paragraph. So like earlier, I'll click and drag while holding Alt on the first paragraph to duplicate across. I'll place it on the next column and drag the type out to fill 5 columns. Into my Google Doc, copy and paste into my new type box, and this time change the font size to around 17. Finally, for the last elements. So on my sketch, I want to place some footer elements at the bottom of the poster. So I'll drag while holding Alt to duplicate a single line. I'll copy from the Google Doc, paste into Illustrator and set the type to around 17 points and place it in the first 2 columns on the base of my grid. Next, I'll duplicate across 2 times, copy and paste from my Google Doc into the area, and now I have my type contents in the poster design. So now my type is in the poster, I can now begin to think about typefaces. Now when it comes to Swiss design, clean and simple typefaces are crucial as they go really well with the clean and minimal design aesthetic. For this reason, sans serif typefaces are very common. For this poster design, I'm going to use the typeface M+1 code. With its slim width, exaggerated crossbars, and charismatic arms, this typeface has a very distinct look and feels a little bit retro. A good option if you want to achieve a more alternative look to your designs. If you want to get hold of this typeface, you can get it for free by going to the GDS font book. This is a font book of curated free fonts I have gathered in an online portal. Here I have categorized a large amount of quality free fonts into categories, and also I have some fonts specific to various design styles. If you want to get access to the fonts I have used in this tutorial, check out the GDS font book library. Simply click on the link in the description, scroll down to Swiss design fonts, see the fonts on offer, and simply click it and it will take you to the link to download. So I'll start by selecting all the type elements and set the font to M+1 code, semi-bold. Now applying a new typeface may change the size. On this occasion, I'll click off to deselect and click on the header and set the font to around 60 points. Next, I'll select the subhead and set the weight to medium and set the size to 40 points. Next, I'll select the first paragraph of type and set the weight to semi-bold with a size of 22 points. I'll select the second paragraph, set the weight to regular and a size of 20 points. And this time I'll come over to the character panel and set the leading to around 30 points. And finally, for my footer elements, I'll select each of them and set the weight to medium and set the size to 18 points. Once I have applied the new font and weight, I'll make sure the type is well placed and move the elements around if I have to. Also, here in the first paragraph, I may have to slightly increase the width of the frame so the type sits comfortably in that space. Once I'm happy with my placement, I can press Command: on Mac or Control: on PC, and that will toggle off the guides so I can get a better look at my current layout. So by creating a nice contrast of weight and size with the typeface, this establishes a clear visual hierarchy and what my eye will look at first. Here we will have a nice graphic texture at the top and the layout of type below. Even though it is simple, there is a clear visual hierarchy. So once all my visual elements are placed, I can now start to think about color. So when it comes to poster design, unless I have a particular color palette in mind at the start, I'll typically leave this until the overall poster composition is complete. Once I have all the visual elements on the page, I can now focus on how color is going to work. At this stage, I can start sampling colors and applying colors. Though on this occasion, I'm going to use a color palette I prepared earlier. If you want to get access to the free color palette, check the link in the description. So from my palette, I'm going to select the blue, white and grey palette and copy and paste it into my poster design. And I'll place it underneath. Now changing the color of the elements is pretty straightforward here. First, I'll select the blue color and up to my swatches panel, I'll click the burger menu and click new swatch and click OK, and I'll quickly do the same for the dark blue. Next I'll press A, and with the direct selection tool, while holding shift, I'll click on all the yellow shapes to select multiple. Now an easier way to do this would be to use the magic wand tool. Here I can select the magic wand, select a yellow color, and it will select all objects of that color in my composition. Now I can simply make sure the foreground color is selected and click on the blue swatch in my panel to set a new color. Next I'll do the same for the type. I'll select the type, make sure the foreground color is selected, and click on the dark blue swatch in my panel to set the new color. So now, if I press either Command: on Mac or Control Option on Windows, we can toggle on and off the guides and get a better look at the layout. Right now, I think the type is looking a bit flat, so I'll select the title and the first paragraph and change it to the blue color, and that will set some contrast between them. Lastly, I'll select the 3 strokes at the bottom of the poster, make sure the stroke is selected, and click the blue swatch. Perfect. Now, when designing posters, I often like to explore multiple versions. I do this because I like to see options, as my first poster design may not always be the right one. When designing a poster, I often like to explore a variety of color and layout options. Now, a really useful and fast trick to explore alternative colors in Illustrator is to use the recolor feature. So let's see how this works. So first I'll duplicate my artboard. I'll press Command : to bring back my guides. Over in the layers, I'll turn off any locks applied to my layers. I'll come up to View, down to Guides, and I'll make sure Guides are unlocked. I'll come over and click on the Artboard tool. I'll click on my poster, and while holding Alt, I'll drag it to the right. Upon release, I'll have quickly duplicated the artboard and all its contents. Now check this out. So with the selection tool, I'll drag to select all the elements of my new poster. I'll come up to Edit, scroll down to Edit Colors, then scroll across and select and click on Recolor Artwork. Upon click, a menu will appear. Now, this menu represents the current colors that are applied to my poster. If I click on one of the colors on the circle and start to drag it around, this will change the colors. Now, not only can we change the colors, but we can alter the prominence. If we click and drag on the handles below the circle, we can alter the prominence, which creates some very alternative results. And below this, we can drag to alter the lightness and darkness. By playing around with these handles, you can get some very interesting variations. Now, in a newer version of Illustrator, you can also come into the generative recolor. Here I'll type, say, jungle, and I'll get some interesting colors which I can choose from. And next I'll try sunset, and again I will get more color schemes. So that's how easy it can be to create a color variation of your poster design. Now, I could use this technique to duplicate the artboard many times and apply a variety of colors, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'll keep it short. Now, as well as changing the colors, we can also change the typeface. Now we have our typeface elements in place, it's just a case of changing the font. So I'll select the type elements and change the font to Gill Sans. Gill Sans is another typeface you can get from the GDS font book. For the header, I'll set this to bold and I'll change it to all caps and scale down a little. For the subhead, I'll set this to medium, all caps and scale down. For the first paragraph, I'll set this to bold. And for the last piece of type, I'll set this to medium. And for the footer elements, I'll also set this to medium. And if I press either Command : on Mac or Control : on Windows, we can toggle on and off the guides and take a better look at the composition in a new style. Easy. Now, looking back at my rough sketches, I had a few ideas in mind for a potential layout. Once I have one layout design in a good place with my type and image elements, it can be easy then to quickly generate other layouts. So I'll make sure that none of the layers are locked. I'll make sure that guides are unlocked and visible by pressing Command : on Mac or Control : on PC. I'll come to the Artboard tool, and with it clicked, I'll select my poster, hold Alt and drag to the right. Upon release, this will now duplicate the artboard again, and now I can make some easy alterations. Now, typically on a project, I'll generate a lot of versions to look at, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'll just do one. So this time, I want to go with a different approach. Looking at my sketches, another example I liked was the example where the type is placed in square blocks. Upon further development, it appeared that for this design, a 16-column grid would work well to align all my type elements. So I'll click on the selection tool, select everything on my poster, including the guide grid, and just simply delete. And now I essentially have a blank canvas. And we are going to use the same technique as earlier, but this time I do not want to include a margin. So I'll grab the shape tool, make sure to have the grid layer selected. I'll drop down a shape to the entire size of the canvas, come up to Object, Path, and click Split into Grid. And this time I'll hit Preview, type in 16 for columns, and click OK. With the shape still selected, up in View, down to Guides, Make Grids, and boom, a fresh guide set. Next, I'll click on the Content layer and come back into my texture set I created earlier. This time I'm going to go with something different and use some solid vector shapes. Now, there is a variety I could go with here, but I want this again to be super simple and bold. So from one of the pre-made textures, I'll select part of the texture. Here I'll go with 2 by 3 squares. Copy, and back into my poster design, I'll paste, position and scale to fit the canvas. With my artwork now placed on the poster, I now have some areas that can contain my type. And I can see that the column grid is going to help me align my text. Now, adding the type is going to be easy as I already have some prepared on the previous posters. So I'll select the title on the first poster, copy, paste and drag it across to my new poster and set it next to the column grid. In this instance, I'll double click into the type and I'll press enter to add a line break. I'll change the type color to white and just scale it down to sit comfortably in the space and align to my grid. So using this technique, I'll duplicate all the other type elements and position them on my new poster like so, making sure to align them to the column grid. Also, I'll place my type into position. I'll be sure to change the color of the type as well. In this instance, I'll change the color of the type to white for maximum legibility and go with a new font. This time I'll go with Millard. And I'll make sure to change the weight and size of the fonts to position the type nicely in the space. I'll even bring over the strokes and footer elements across and fit them in nicely. I'll press Command : to toggle off the guides, and here we can see a new version of the poster. Nice! And just like earlier, I can quickly duplicate my poster, select all, come up to Edit, down to Edit Color, across to Recolor Artwork. And here I can toggle the select color and choose another colorway. And if you want to keep going and push it further, I can duplicate another artboard again, change the composition of the type to something even more dynamic, and make the title much larger and to the side, and even change the type style to a stroke, move my elements around, recolor, and boom, another version just like that. So that's how you can create a really simple yet bold geometric style Swiss poster design in Adobe Illustrator. So what can we learn? Well, first, sketching your design can really help with your creativity to generate ideas. This gives you something to work with really quickly on the computer. And then as you develop your design, you can create variations which can help you further explore your design layouts. It's good to see alternative options that could lead to stronger solutions. So when creating your design, consider exploring options. In this tutorial, I also demonstrated how to set up and use grids. When creating posters in Illustrator or any design software, be sure to consider using grids, as it can make the whole process so much easier and help structure your work. Finally, design is not only about pretty images, but also about careful consideration of visual hierarchy, layout and alignment. Get the basics right and you can build from there. The Swiss design approach was all about practicality, clarity, conformity and stripping things back. The idea of Swiss design is to optimize visual communication and remove distracting information to make the communication as impactful as possible. For this reason, Swiss design is well known for its clean, high contrast, heavily structured, minimal and highly typographic approach. This is something we explored in this poster, how posters don't have to be too busy and how simplicity can work really well to maximize legibility and impact. So this is one of the many poster designs I have created in Adobe Illustrator. If you want to save yourself some time and use these poster design templates, you can get them as part of the Poster Design eBook. The Poster Design eBook includes crucial design theory to help you create professional poster design, with lots of design resources, more tutorials, and includes all the poster design tutorial assets. If you want to learn more, you can check the link in the description. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to be notified of more tutorial videos like this in future. Now, this tutorial was created for all my members of the GDS Design School community. If you'd like to join the GDS Design School community, where we chat about design, give each other feedback, and where I set design challenges, you're all welcome to join for free. Again, the link is in the description, and I look forward to seeing you there. So until my next design tutorial, unleash your creativity, and I'll see you next time.